warning. But I will share with you that I woke up this morning with the subject of faith on my mind. And then we got to listen to a sermon from Brother Vernon about that exact subject. And some of the verses that he used were some of the things that have been on my mind. So that's still on my mind, and I want to comment a little bit further about it. So I will start by sharing that when I was a young man, and yes, there was a time when I was young, in the dark ages, when I was probably in my teens or early 20s, I went to my father one time. I was having a difficult period. I have no idea what it was about when I look back on it, but I remember the discussion we had. And I went to Dad and said, Dad, I'm having troubles. And for those of you who don't know, my father is Elder Hewlin Bass, so Primitive Baptist minister. And I went to Dad and I said, I'm having this difficulty and that difficulty, and I don't know how to deal with it. I need more faith. I need more faith. He said, son, the problem is you're not using the faith you've got.
Amen, that's right.
Okay? And that's the part that I remember. So, in life we all have tribulations. John 16:33 tells us that. And it doesn't stop as you get older. It just changes in different forms, but we all have various tribulations. So one of the things that Brother Vernon mentioned was Ephesians chapter 6, Armor of God. And I'll read a couple of verses here. Verse 16, he quoted, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. The shield of faith. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit right here. So when you're facing tribulations, we also know that in James chapter 2, he tells us that faith without works is dead. So how do you use that faith is a question that I've really struggled with in many ways. And it tells us right here how to do that. You have to lean into it. Noah, as Brother Vernon mentioned, had faith, and God gave him direction. And then what did he do? He got to work. Took 100 years, but he built an ark, right? So you got to lean into your faith. You've got to lean on your faith, and then you have to work, all right? And that is a salvation that you have right now here. And that's what these words tell us. So it also makes me think, and again, stealing from Brother Vernon, he mentioned Matthew chapter 4. So it comes to mind about the temptations of Jesus in chapter 4. And what I find interesting is if you go back into chapter 3, verse 16 and 17, which are the last two verses of chapter 3, and Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. So God, voice from heaven, God spoke. And then only 4 verses later, the temptation in the wilderness, Jesus says, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. The very first temptation, right after God the Father spoke from heaven and expressed this, and that this is what we need, and that's what this book gives us, is His Word. And then I would say that this all leads me to what I think is, in a way, the conclusion of my comments. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, Jesus Christ, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. We have so much to be thankful for because God has given us the gift of faith, and we need to lean into it and depend on his word. And if we do that, we can block those fiery darts that are coming at us in the tribulations of the world every day. Thank you. No more clouds in the sky, no more tears to dim the eye. All is peace forevermore on that happy golden shore. What a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. When I look upon his face, the one who saved me by his grace. When he takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. When I look upon his face, the one who saved me by his grace. When he takes me by the hand and leads me to the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be.
Thank you, Brother David. I appreciate what you had to say. Thank you, Brother Randy, for the kindness. And I thank each of you for your kindness shown to us, and especially to whomever picked that picture of me out and put it upon your announcement. I appreciate that. I have no idea when that picture was made, but it had to be at least 20, 25 years before today. And it's kind of made me concerned that somebody might want to sue us for false advertising. Because the one that stands before you is not the one that was pictured. But I thank you. I thank you for your kindness. I thank you for all through the years. Your love. 5th chapter of Daniel, 5th verse. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loose, and his knees smote one against the other. And from that, the saying, the handwriting, is on the wall. History has a way of repeating itself. Whether we like it or whether we don't, it just does. First chapter of first chapter of Isaiah gives a real understanding of that day and that time. If you look at the 2nd verse, hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord hath spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. The ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. And then an indication of the times, a sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters, they have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. What a proclamation against God's people, that they have just turned their back upon Him, that they no longer hold Him to be of great authority. They no longer consider Him and honor Him. In the household, no longer do they talk about Him. In society, no longer do they bring Him forward. Now, that's a long time ago. It was 580 years before the birth of Christ. And after His life and His death, we stand today. I think it's pretty important to say, I'm not sure, but we very well may be in that same position today. A society that has turned their backs upon God. People that no longer consider Him to be the highest authority. As a matter of fact, the government now becomes a higher authority than what He is, but it's only that way because we let it become that way. We didn't voice our opinion. Look a little further, if you don't mind, in the first chapter. Your country is desolate, the 7th verse says. Your cities are burned with fire. Your land, strangers devour it in your presence, and it is desolate, as overthrown by strangers. So there's no hope. We pack it up, we go to our places of abode, and we just wait for whatever we wait for. But look at the next verse. And the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. I think that's telling us today that there are sanctuaries that we can cover ourselves and we can hear the gospel proclaimed. And God's people throughout the ages have had that opportunity. In the 25th chapter of Jeremiah talks about what's going to happen. If you want to turn there, fine. If you don't, I'll just read it for you. We'll go to the 8th verse, 25th chapter of Jeremiah. Jeremiah says, Therefore saith the Lord of hosts, because you have not heard my words, because, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, saith the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against all these nations round about, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, and a hissing and perpetual desolation. Moreover, adding to that, I will take from them the voice of mirth, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones, and the light of the candle. Now, careful attention to the next two verses. And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished, then I will punish the king of Babylon, that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, make it a perpetual desolation. In this particular story, I think we're well blessed to see what has happened. Children of Israel, they have followed after all the things of the world to the time and extent that they have forsaken God. And God has told them, because you have turned your back upon me, things are going to be different. The hordes of the Lord are going to come and they're going to overtake you. That's exactly what happened. First element that came took all of Judah and took them to Babylon. And the children of Israel were given 10 more years to change their ways. They didn't do it. So in 10 years, Nebuchadnezzar came back and he took the rest of them and they took them to a foreign land. You might think that's not too bad, but if you turn to the 137th Psalm, this psalm will give you an understanding of what they faced and where they were. Look at it if you don't mind. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept. When what? When we remembered Zion. So in their isolation in this new place in Babylon, which, to be very honest, is some of the most beautiful land that there is, and at that particular time was just the premier country that it was, but it wasn't home. It wasn't where they came from. And their works and lack of worshiping God brought them to a time and place where they were overrun. Now they're in Babylon, a strange country. You realize today that what you believe and what you hold to makes you strange individuals. Anyway, they turned their back upon God, and God had them overrun, and the children of Israel now are in a foreign country. And it wasn't what they thought that it might be. And so it says again, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept. When what? When we remembered Zion. How blessed we are today to have a place that we can come to, a place that we can come and worship Him, and a place that not everybody's going to appreciate. Not everybody's going to love. One of the people that I love as much as anybody in my life felt like that if it wasn't a large church, then it wasn't a church. You know, God's got lots of churches across this nation that are not large churches, one at home, but we enjoy what we've got. We just had our association, and I'm going to brag on God a little bit if you don't mind. We just had last weekend our association, and in that association, this last year we've had several join and several be baptized, and obviously the Lord was just preparing us for what was ahead. Right. And what was ahead was a 4 days of hard work. Our little church, it'll seat, if you put everybody together, it'll seat 150 people, but we had over 250 people at lunch on Saturday morning, last Saturday. And God allowed us to handle that. Now, that's not the norm. Thank the Lord, it only happens once every 3 years, but it was a wonderful, glorious time. And God's people coming from all over this country came to worship with us in our church for a while, and we loved it. We enjoyed it. I tell you that it was 150 people, and this is how I know. Several years back, we were going to build onto our lunchroom, and so we got involved in city politics there of how to do this. And one of the first things they told me was, well, you go to the pews and you measure 18 inches. And every 18 inches is a person. And you count up all those 18 inches, and then you divide them by 4, and that tells you how many approved parking places you got to have. I told the guy, I said, I'm just going to tell you, I'll be very honest with you. I don't know how many people we got in our church that can only sit in an 18-inch space. I'm afraid there's going to be some that's going to have 24, and they're going to have some may have. What about a mother with a baby? But he said, well, that's the law. That's the law. You see the things that we come up against today? It's not about what you believe, but it's more about all the things that are placed upon it. Children of Israel, they turned their back upon the one true and living God, and here's the result. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For they that carried us away, carried away captive, required of us a song.
And they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. Now, I've heard this used sometimes as somebody that's away from the church and coming back. This is history, folks. This actually happened. These are God's people that are in exile now because they turned their back upon Him, and they're longing. Oh, tell me of Zion. Tell me of the glory. Tell me of the things that He has blessed us with. Tell me, preacher, about how gracious and good He is, and encourage us to press on. Encourage us to stand up and then to sit down upon His promises and His precepts and His principles. Tell us about our obligation to the church. Our obligation certainly might be financial, but more than that, it's being there.
That's right.
It's occupying your position. And if it takes more than 18 inches, that's okay. Doesn't matter. But occupy your position. Be there to be able to worship Him. Why? Because you will be blessed because of it. And if you don't, you'll miss blessings. Carol and I dated. I was raised in Dallas, raised in Fort Worth, and you don't understand what a mix that is. That people in Dallas hated the people in Fort Worth, and Fort Worth they hated Dallas. But I was there, she was there. And you know what happened? I was still living at home. I was still just finished high school, the first year of college, and we would call each other. My dad finally come and said, "You're going to have to find a cheaper way to communicate." So we began to write letters to each other. I would write my thoughts down, and I would send them to her. She would write her thoughts, and she would send them to me. Every time I would send a letter, I could not hardly wait for 2 or 3 days to go to the mailbox and see what she had said. What did she say? That's none of your business. I can't tell you what she said. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, she's all got all those letters, and they're wrapped up. And she has told someone in our family, when I die, you put that in the coffin with me. It's nobody else's business. It'll just go with me. You see, the glorious thing of that is we were expressing our love one for another. What would it be like if God sent you a love letter and He sent it right to the church by the preacher and you weren't there that day? Can you imagine? Can you imagine what you must have missed? In this particular situation, they said, we longed. We longed. They wanted us to sing a song of Zion. They wanted to make fun of it. They wanted to draw things about it. But here's the situation. We couldn't do it. We hung our harps upon a willow. And in sadness, we were there. How long shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. I know a lot of you here today have got some memories about the church that you came from, the physical church building, and the other church building that others came for, and you remember that. And yesterday we told you, we drove by them and we saw them, and we're reminded of the good things that happened there. And I'll be honest with you, got a little tear in my eye about some of the things that I remember that happened there. Praise be to God. You're in a place, in a position now where God has blessed you. Then enjoy it. Be here. Support it financially, but more than that, support it with your physical being. Sing the songs of Zion. Sing songs of praise and hear the gospel proclaimed, because the words and the teachings you're going to hear hit at this place, you're not going to find them everywhere. You're just not going to find them. Look what he says. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall ye be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. You know that the armies of Babylon, that's exactly what they did to God's people, exactly. And in this psalm it says it's going to happen to you one day. It's going to happen to you. time had come where Belshazzar was king. And this is in the 69th year. Isn't that amazing? You know, it's like God's got a calculator, and he knows exactly what's going to happen. And they have gone through a change. Remember Daniel and the three young men. They tried to change them. They said, "Come and eat at the king's table." And what did Daniel say? Daniel said, "I can't do that. I can't do that." And he made an agreement with one of the caretakers for them. And he said, "Just us four, we're not going to eat at the king's table. We can't do that. We're not going to do. So just give us pulse." I really did not know till I checked to find out what pulse is. You know, it's just beans. That's it. Just feed us for a few days and see if we're not as strong as they are. See if we're not just as strong. And you know what happened? He did, and they did. God bless. They didn't have to become part of society. And I'll be honest with you, you don't either. Amen. You don't either. Amen, you can stand differently. Belshazzar threw a party. You know, there's nothing wrong with a party. I'm gonna be some of the years old here pretty quick, and I wouldn't mind having a party. We threw one time. I'll never forget this. We threw a surprise birthday party for my wife probably 10, 15 years ago, and everybody hid their cars down the street. She didn't know. I kept her out Sunday afternoon, and we're driving around. She said, "Where are we going?" I said, "I just want to see the country." And they're gathering at the house, you know, while I've got her in the car, and we're driving around. She said, "Well, let's go home." I said, "Well, not yet. I want to go see this or what." I was just making excuses, and so finally I brought her. No cars. I thought, okay, this is going to be great. Drive in the park, and we had on the kitchen had a little entryway, so we're going to go in there. And I open the door and stand back. She walks in, and they all scream, "Happy birthday!" And she falls to her knees. I thought, she's dead. She has fainted. She has dead. You know, surprise birthday parties is not the best thing you can ever do. You know, you ought to give somebody a little notice. I learned that personally. But in this particular situation, it's been 69 years. 69 years. They have been in this society. They have changed. But God told them by the word of Jeremiah, it's going to be 70 years, and here they're coming on the 70. And Belshazzar decides to throw a big party. And everything's going all right. Everybody's enjoying themselves. They're drinking and they're having a good time. And then he crosses the line. You know, God says sometimes you do this and you'll pay for it. You do that and you'll pay for it. And sometimes he just says to us, it comes this far, and if it comes any farther, I'll handle it. I'll handle it. And that's exactly what he did. Look at this. Let's go. So where we want to go. Belshazzar, in the second verse, he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father, actually is his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken out of the temple, which is in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. They crossed the line. They brought all the gold, they brought all the silver, and they were drinking and having a good time. And in the fifth verse, it tells exactly what happened. In that same hour, right then, when they had decided, and he had decided to bring all the golden goblets and the golden drinking material from the safe and bring it there, and now they're going to use it. It's the same ones that they had used in Israel, the same ones in Jerusalem. And God said, that's too far. And that same hour, that same time, came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote it over against the candlestick on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw that part of the hand that wrote. Kind of like this. There's a hand, and it's writing something. And he may not be able to see what it's writing, but he sees the hand. And there's no body with that hand. And he becomes disturbed. Then the king's countenance was changed, I would imagine. And his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. He was so scared, he was so upset that his knees shook one to another. There's only been a time or two in my life that's occurred that involved a snake. I hate snakes, and they can make my knees smite. But I'll tell you one thing, there's coming a change upon what is happening. Belshazzar, king, cried aloud to bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and the king spake to the wise men, saying, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. All the Chaldeans sent all their men and their soothsayers to try to figure out, but they could not read the writing nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. The queen said this, by reasons of the words of the king and his lord came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not the thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in the kingdom. Careful attention about how she's describing this man. There is a man in the kingdom, and who is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, his grandfather, and actually it was his grandmother is one being spoken of, and it was her husband, it was Nebuchadnezzar. And she said, in those days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. She says, there's one man. There's one man that can come and he can answer this question. And he's not a Chaldean. He is a Jew. And he can come and he can tell you what this says. Then was Daniel brought in before the king. And the king spake and said unto Daniel, art thou that Daniel which are of the captive of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? He said, I've heard even of thee. The spirit of the gods is in thee, and thy light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And every time I read this, I wonder what he thinks about me. I wonder what he thinks about me personally. I wonder if he sitting upon his throne, if he has approved of some of the thoughts that come across my mind. I wonder sometimes if he approves of some of the deeds that I may accomplish, or if he approves of maybe the language, or if he approves the way that I prepare myself to try to preach to God's children. I wonder sometimes what he thinks. I wonder sometimes what he thinks about us as a congregation. I wonder sometimes what he thinks about the songs we sing. You know, friend, we have got songs that have withstood history, that have withstood time. Songs written hundreds of years ago from men's interpretation of the Scripture or the involvement of what they've done. And they wrote it by heart. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. You think one day the writer just happened to think of those words? They were placed in his heart, and they were thoughts that he had, and they were things that he did, and they deserve to be sung today. If you don't know them, dig them out. You'll be amazed at how they'll bring your temperament back, and you'll be amazed of how the church will be blessed for it. I was blind, but now I see. That doesn't mean you didn't have good sight or you were nearsighted. That means you had no ability to see, no ability to understand. And then a glorious thing occurred and you became a changed individual and your blindness went away and now you have perfect eyesight. And now you've got a heart that feels and now you have ears that hear. One of the questions my wife asks at me every time I start heading for the front door, do you have your ears on? And I had to tell her, yes, I do, or no, I don't. And if I don't, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get them. I paid way too much not to use those things. But friend, I had good hearing before that. I could hear him when he spoke to me. I could hear him when he gave me encouragement. I could hear him when he gave me chastisement. I could hear it. And then, as the writer of the song says, now I was blind, but now I see. Are you he that I had given to my grandfather all this information? Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me that they should read the writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not shew the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve the doubts. Now, if you canst read the writing and make known to me, I've got something for you. Interpretation thereof, thou should be clothed with scarlet, have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. The king, the queen, and you. And you. What a glorious position. I remember when I was working, I can remember that. I waited for the next advancement, made more money, made more responsibility, made a little better job. But in this particular situation, Daniel, if you can just tell what this means, you did it for Nebuchadnezzar, surely you can do it for me. Surely you can. And here's the response of a godly man. Daniel answered, the 17th verse, and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give the rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him interpretation thereof. But before he did, he's got something to say. And what he has to say is about your grandfather. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he kept alive, and whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up. Do you realize God has kings in his hand? And he has the power to raise them, and he has the power to bring them down. And we sit and worry about somebody being made president that might not be qualified. He has the power to raise them up, and he has the power to bring them down. As a matter of fact, Proverbs says it's just like a rolling river. It's just like one backing forth. He has the power. Don't think for a moment that we're without a helper as a nation. We have the Most High God that cares for us and that watches over us. As much political as I'll get today, we need to lean on him more. You know why? The handwriting is on the wall. You love this country? The handwriting is on the wall. You love this church? The handwriting is on the wall. You love your pastor? You love those within here? The handwriting is on the wall. And I'll be very honest with you. I'm going to leave here in about 20 minutes. I'll be very honest with you. It's not just here. It's back home where I'm going. The handwriting is on the wall. We didn't know we could get through last weekend. We had a change within the people in our church. We felt like it was just going to disturb us and hurt us. But you know what? We came together in a way that God blessed. Why? The handwriting was on the wall. We as a nation, friend, we better be reading it. We better be seeing it. Because it's not going to get better if he doesn't let it get better. And the voices and the prayers of the saints, they should roll unto him, that he can answer our prayers, that he can bless us as a nation and bless us as families. fathers and mothers in the congregation, how blessed we are, but how we ought to be aware the handwriting's on the wall. If you don't like it right now, you're going to hate it if we don't pay attention to the handwriting on the wall. Daniel, can you read that? I can, but I'm going to tell you about your grandfather first. He looked out across Babylon, and he said to himself, look what I've done. Look at the glory of this. Look how it's been blessed. And you know what God did? God changed him. And he became as if he was an animal. And for 7 years, he ate like an oxen. As a matter of fact, his fingers and his nails were so long that he was just an animal. And he fed out in the fields. Here's the king of Babylon, and he's eating with the animals. And it happens because he would not give God the praise. Church, we gotta give him the praise. Amen. You have blessings in the church. Your pastor didn't do it. Your deacons didn't do it. God in heaven blessed you. This weekend has been great. I've enjoyed it. But why? Because God has blessed it. And the handwriting's on the wall. It's time we understand that He's God. That it's not in Washington, D.C. That it's not in Oklahoma City at the Capitol. It's not in Austin, Texas at the Capitol. He reigns. He reigns. And the handwriting is on the wall. Your grandfather, he roamed the fields for 7 years, and then he came to himself. He as an oxen didn't decide one day, well, I'm really tired of this. I'll just say He is God. He's God. No, God gave him the ability to understand and know He's paying for what He said. And when he came to his own self, he realized all the praise, the honor, and the glory goes to Him who sits upon the throne in heaven in immortal glory. Those little babies, those children that you have, you think that they look like you? You think that they have your temperament? Wouldn't it be a lot better if they looked like Him and had His temperament? Wouldn't that make you happy? That would make you joyous. Joyous. Why? Because the handwriting is on the wall. Daniel, what do you have to say? And thou his son, 22nd verse, and thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. Belshazzar, you knew it. You lived through that. You saw your grandfather, and you knew for 7 years why he was like he was. It's because he wouldn't give God. You don't think it's important to give Him all the praise? That house you've got, that car you've got, that bank account you've got, those children you've got, you think you got them because you're so good looking? Not that way. He gave them to you because He's God and He sits upon a throne. And the handwriting is on the wall. If you love it, if you like it, if you care for it, if you love Him, if you love one another, then you ought to let somebody know. I've enjoyed watching you intertwingle with one another and how you have cared for each other. You know, you didn't just start that. You've been doing that for a long time. I remember Elder Cummins when he was pastor. I remember there was just a joy here. And I remember when your dad was pastor. And today there's just a joy. God gives you that. God gives you. And if you like it, you care for it. Have you wondered today why somebody wasn't here? Well, call them. Ask them. Are you okay? Is everything all right? Anything we can do? We had such a good time at church. Why? Why would we need to involve others? Why? Because the handwriting is on the wall. And as we as a nation, if we don't understand there's a better way to do things, to involve God, and to quit watching my language so that if I don't really know what I said, to hold me accountable for it. If I don't know the proper pronouns or the proper things to say, I'm sorry, I just don't know. I just don't know. But what I do know, it's time for a change. And we got to go back to Him because the handwriting's on the wall. You love this? You love this kingdom? You love this at this time together? God's blessed you. Let's go on with it. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knowest all this. But hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they that have brought the vessels of the house before these, and thou and the lords thy wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gods and of gold and brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, which nor hear nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Do you want to have a positive church? You want to have a church house full? Praise God. Amen. Give Him all the glory. Tell your friends and neighbors about it. This is a wonderful place. Elder Hugh Montgomery had the best way of saying this. He said, I get people ask me all the time, where do you go to church? And I said, I go down to the Primitive Baptist Church. And they say, what's that? You know what he said? Come see. Come see. What great encouragement. Brother Webb, you don't understand. My kids have gone away there to another place another time. Listen, I got kids. I wished some of them could be here this weekend, but they're not. They're not, and that's their choice. That's okay. But it hurts. It hurts because they were raised in the church, but they come to a point in time, and this is not criticism, this is life. They came to a point in time in their life to where they wanted something else. They wanted something more. And now they got it. You know what happens when we want something more? If it's not already here, then it's not sanctioned and it doesn't belong. You know why we don't have the various churches for little kids and churches for this and that? Because that's not the way in the apostolic time that they did. They served one another. They were with one another. The apostles and the things they preached, it was such that they enjoyed the relationship. And they grew. Hundreds, thousands added because He blessed them for it. You know why today we didn't bring in string instruments to sing with? Well, one reason is because it would have taken from the beauty of the song service. And another is God didn't sanction that. That's not the way they did it in the time where the church began. And that's what our guide is. That's what our solace is. That's where our enjoyment is. It's not because we're old fogies, although we're old. It's not that. It's that it's just a joyous time to worship just like He has told us to worship. Children of Israel needed a king. They got a king. Things went south. You know, He's given us an opportunity to teach our children within the church house. Well, Brother Webb, they're going to make a little noise. Let me tell you, kids. Let me tell you, children. Let me tell you, fathers and mothers. A little noise is better than no noise. I've had both. I'd rather have a little noise. I'd rather have some children crying occasionally or moms and dads perplexed about what to do. Friend, that's the church. And if you're not in agreement with that, the handwriting's on the wall. I'm not asking you to change one thing. What I'm asking you to do is consider to love what you've got more. To hold it closer, to hold it in a place, in a position to where you can't hardly wait to get to church on Sunday morning. That's good church. That's good church. 24th verse. Then was the part of the hand sent from Him, and this is the writing was written. And here comes Daniel telling Belshazzar what it says. And I could do this a lot better if I spoke Chaldean, but I don't. I don't even speak good English, but I'll handle it the best I can. And this is the writing that was written, Daniel says. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. And then he gives the interpretation. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene means God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. And you know what he's saying to Belshazzar? It's over. It's over. 69 years. And when the 70th year comes, it's over. Tekel, thou art weight thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Belshazzar, you're not a man that men and women and children can trust. It's not you. You have been weighed in the balances and you have been found to be wanting. Peres, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Belshazzar, your time is up. 70 years was what I was promised, and 70 years is what it's going to be. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. But then, in that night, was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. Belshazzar, it's over. It's over. And Darius, the Median, took the kingdom of being about 62 years old. The thing I would ask that you would remember out of all of this is, first of all, they turned their backs on God. They rejected Him. They rejected His goodness. They rejected His teachings. They rejected His love. And by that, given every opportunity to change, they changed not. And for 70 years, they sat beside the river in Babylon, and they hung their harps in the willow, and they did not sing the songs of Zion. They remembered it, and they felt sad because of it. And they even said, if I forget Jerusalem, if I forget the glory of it, may the tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if that occurs. And I got a feeling they never forgot that. But I think what's important for us today, as a church, as church members, as ministers, as those that love the church, as families, as citizens of Zion, as close as we can be, we need to know, we need to understand that there is a place. There's a garden, a cottage in a garden of cucumbers. There's a sanctuary here amongst you that you can come to and you can worship Him. And if we choose not to, the handwriting is on the wall. May God bless you. God bless you.